All right. Hey there, it's Brian Sebastian, Movie Reviews and More, the Women's Broadcast TV Network, IT247, WomenOnTV.tv. And this is what I call the more part of When We Marched. Anybody who knows about Drum and Bugle Corps knows I'm a drum course nut. That's my Instagram handle. But it's also fun because a lot of people have never had the chance to tell their stories of all those people who did march. So I wanted to create these shows of people who have marched, have great stories to tell. A lot of them have never been told before. So when you think of DCI friends or, marching in the 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever it may be, well, we have one other, Scott Williams. So Scott, do movie reviews and more. I know you've been paying attention to all the stuff that we've been doing, but when you march, let's go back to the day when you first started, because you got an interesting history. Go.
1969, 6 years old. There was a parking lot of this department store called Big N, and it was in the western part of the city of Pittsfield, Massachusetts, where I'm from. And
is that where the Kingsmen were from?
Where who was?
The Kingsmen from there, Pittsfield?
No. Fitchburg was where the Kingsmen were from in Massachusetts, but you also had the Long Island Kingsmen.
Right.
So they were Hicksville or Kings Park, excuse me. But in my city, there was Pittsfield Boys Club Cavaliers, or the Pittsfield Cavaliers, as they were known by the end. They were like Star of Indiana. They were around for 10 years, basically, from like 59 or 57, thereabout, until 67. My brother marched in that corps. Ended up, he started off as a baritone player, ended up being guard captain by the end. Another corps that was there, their feeder corps, the Imperials, one of my other brothers marched in. So I've got 4 brothers and a sister. So I'm the sixth child, but not in that order. So that's how I got the bug. There were other corps in the town or city, the Interstatesmen.
Oh, I remember them.
Yeah, which was they were perennial DCA favorites throughout the 60s and the 50s. They were pretty powerful coming up. They were from it was kind of weird. They were from Troy, New York, and Pittsfield, Massachusetts. So that's how they were billed. Let's see, other corps in the area. The Monarchs were from Pittsfield. The Marksmen were from Springfield, but the Monarchs kind of looked like the Marksmen. Everybody pretty much had the same instructional staffs.
At that point you could teach like 3 corps if you chose to.
Oh yeah, Dominic Del Rey, who came up with the mellophone. Never patented it, but he came up with it.
Oh, I didn't know that. I love the mellophone. If I was a horn player, that's what I would have chose to play. I love the sound of that.
Yeah, he invented that, and then for whatever reason he didn't patent it, somebody else did. But that's a long story. In my town, I keep calling it my town. It's my city, but every corps in existence pretty much came through Pittsfield.
Doing the shows there. So I can't believe you started off at 6, man. You man, wow.
Yeah.
Can't even fathom that. How many years did you actually march for, would you say then?
Let's see, my last year marching was 2017. I was assistant drum major of the Sunrisers.
Okay. All right.
So
When did so if you remember the age of, you started at 6, if you're at the age of 10, who were you marching with at the age of 10?
at the age of 10, there was a parade corps in Pittsfield called the Brassmen. They didn't last long. Did a couple of parades, and that was it. You know, so that was my tour coming up into the early 70s. Everybody in the neighborhood, there were no other drum corps in the town, in the city at the time, after the Cavaliers kind of met their demise. Other corps tried to start, usually on a parade basis,
Yeah.
but didn't get anywhere past that. There was always what used to be an all-girl corps called the Pom Poms.
Yep, I remember them.
So they started taking in male members, and at that time they were just a parade corps. There was nowhere else to go unless you wanted to go over to New York or to Connecticut. So we weren't old enough, so this is where we ended up. So we had fun doing it. We learned a lot. We saw a lot of different corps. So a lot of the fan favorites, Boston Crusaders would come into town, Milford Shoreliners, over what we call over the mountain, was the Bethesda Emerald Knights and the Spiegeliers.
I remember the Spiegeliers. I haven't heard that name in a long time. Wow.
Yeah. So they ended up merging together and became Avant-Garde from
That's
Saratoga.
Right. Upstate New York, yeah.
Yeah. But every 4th of July, at least, there would be at least, you'd have at least one contest, throughout the year that would occur. And then you'd have maybe one in the fall. You'd see like 27th would come in, Boston, like I said. Emerald Cadets would come in from New Haven. There were always corps that were circulating through, and there was always this, I want to do that because it was cool. Everybody was into military bearing and wanting to play drums and the way the horns were and everything, and just really cool stuff.
I still think of, if I hadn't become a drummer, obviously I would have loved to have played mellophone, but I'm like, I didn't want to play horn, but I did want to play drum. Until this day, I'm like, what if I would have played horn? My life would have been completely different. I chose the right instrument.
I always liked the contrabass, man. I always thought that was like it. Carry that big horn, you got respect.
Yeah, you did actually. So you get to, let's see, between 73, 75, and who were you marching with then?
Well, that's when I started to float around. I ended up hooking into like I said, the Pom Poms were around. That's who I hooked into. So everybody in the neighborhood, we all went there. There was another corps that developed out of that was like a Class C corps floating around Pittsfield at the time, called St. Mary's Cardinals. Nothing to do with Beverly Cardinals or anything like that. They just, they thought the name was cool, so they took that name.
And people don't realize that point. If you think of CYO, Catholic Youth Organization, a lot of things came out of Catholic organizations.
Yes. Yes. Cavaliers came out of Boys Club of America. The Pom Poms came out of the Girls Club, which was kind of interesting. Now you have the Boys and Girls Club, but at the time, I mean, they were all within like maybe 3 minutes of each other walking. So you had
Wow.
the YMCA. Around the corner from the YMCA, you had the Boys Club. Next to the Boys Club, you had the CYC, which was the Catholic Youth Club, and then down the street from that was the Girls Club.
Wow.
So everybody was putting out, things for young folks to do, man, and that was it. It was just growing up at that time was, you're full of all kinds of, I want to do that, I want to do that. So what happened was the firemen used to run the 4th of July parade, and the competition after the parade in Pittsfield. And that, after a while, the firemen said, we don't want to do it anymore. We're good. So what happened was somebody ended up holding a couple of shows for like 3 or so years down in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. So that was my first experience of seeing Sword Excalibur. I knew you'd like that.
I remember that show. That's funny.
Yeah, good show.
Yeah, we had our big rock and we had the sword in it. Now it's 1976. Yep.
Yep.
77.
It was 77. You guys were in the show. 21st Lancers from Norwood.
Yep.
Shoreliners were there. Enfield Centurions were there.
Yep, I remember their hats.
Yep.
What corps were you then with?
I was still doing the parade corps.
Okay.
I was still doing the parade corps. And in Boston was there, which was like the year, was like
77. That's when they had 25 horns that sounded like 42, 45 horns.
They had 34 horns thereabouts in 77. That was the year of the ISO snares.
That's right. Right.
Yep. Those, yeah.
I love that 77, 78 show.
Yes.
Because they were powerful, they were mighty. And you know what? Conquest. That's the best version of Conquest I've ever heard, in my point of view.
Yes. They were determined. The kids ran the corps. That was the whole thing, man. It was just, even when I was there, the kids ran the corps. There was the adults were there to keep things under control, but the kids ran the corps. We're responsible for each other. Collecting dues, the whole 9 yards. That was on us. But I'll get to that at some point.
So you're in 77 right now, going into 78, 79.
Yeah, so 78, I got my first real snare that I really liked. It was an old Premier snare.
They were great snares, but they were heavy.
Yeah, it was all chrome. The shell was chrome. It was chrome.
What'd you do? Get it from North Star or Crossman?
The Kilties.
Really? Oh, okay.
But but that was after seeing the show in Great Barrington. It was time for me to venture out.
You just hit your volume. Scott, undo your volume on your phone. Scott, you just undo your volume on your phone.
Go join the Shoreliners. But there were no Shoreliners in '78, so we ended up just trying to, go to see shows and figure things out, and get through that whole season. The next year, going 78 going into 79, we saw on Drum Corps News that that the Shoreliners were regrouping. So we said, okay, we're going to go there. Ended up being, well, don't want to say an epic fail, but we made connections with a lot of friends that we still have to this day. And the next year,
you're getting into 1980 at that point.
Yes, the kid that I went with, he decided he wasn't going to do drum corps anymore. I couldn't let the bug go. I had it. I went to avant-garde. I remember my first rehearsal. It was around my birthday. It was March. So these guys came to pick me up in Pittsfield, and they were the drum staff and some horn staff, I think. I know it was Neil McBride, who he had just marched in 27th in their snare line in 78. His brother Danny, who was also in 27th.
I know the name.
Yeah, they came from that Spiegel Air crowd, man. But then they were at avant-garde for like 2 years, and then they went to 27th. And Bob Relier was the other one, I believe. But or it was Kevin Walsh. All these, those guys, they came, they picked me up, brought me to rehearsal for the weekend. And I was like, okay. So I was, basically a novice trying to get through this, get into the snare line and everything. Never been in anything like that before. But I was holding my own for a while. Didn't read music.
Because
it was still,
we were picked up off the streets and we were taught to play it like this, and you picked it up.
Yep. Everything was by rote. And I was getting there, but they were like, you need some work. We need tenor players, so we're going to move you over to triples. And I was like, I want to be a snare. Well, they're like, well, not this year. They're like, work for it, and next year. So
and that's what they were saying. Not this year, next year.
Yep.
And it made you work, didn't it?
Oh man, that was the roughest summer I ever had. I always tell everybody, the worst summer I ever had was the summer that I'd probably learned pretty much a good foundation of what I became as far as a drummer. That was
79?
80 in avant-garde. They beat me unmercifully, and it was good. The tenor instructor, they weren't called techs at the time, was this guy Tommy Newell. He was real nice guy, you know. He said, and it's always stuck with me. He said, "There's line players and there's drummers. You're a line player. You can play anything in the line, but you're not per se a drummer, because you can't play parts and talk to people at the same time you're playing parts." It just never clicked to me that, oh, I should be able to carry on a conversation and play parts at the same time.
You know what? You're just bringing back history at that point. I remember that too. You need to be able to go, yeah, you need to play it like this and play it like this on triples. No, you got to play it like this. You had to. No wonder I'm good at what I do. You just reminded me about that.
Here's a funny thing about Tommy Newell. Tommy Newell was taught by this awesome dude that I ended up getting a lot of knowledge from, who was a Skyliner snare drummer, Bob Jamba O'Connor. And Jamba had marched in he had marched in Archie before going to Sky, and before going to Archie, he had marched in this corps from Bayonne, under Mickey Patrone, Junior Corps. I can't even. I'm drawing a blank at the moment of the corps, just because everything, you know, it's what it is. But Jamba was awesome. He still is awesome, and he's still to this day. He's an assistant drum major of the Skyliner alumni.
Wow. How old is he?
Jamba's got to be in his late 70s, early 80s.
And this is what I tell people. You can march in a senior corps or an alumni corps.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always said until you're 86. That's the longest I've ever seen anybody make it to. And you can.
Hey.
And it keeps you young, doesn't it?
With that being said, that following year in 81, I didn't go back to avant-garde. I went to college. I went to the University of Bridgeport. But I ended up joining the Hurricanes that year. So, being in the same camp with Harvey Olderman, it was something. But I got a lesson there as well. You know, more ways than one. Being, I mean, I was a kid who went from a corps that wasn't making it to a corps that was,
established.
Yeah.
I remember those were good years for them too.
It was the year they won DCA.
Yep.
But for me, I wasn't there. I left 2 weeks before DCA.
Oh wow! Were you going back to school?
Yep. It was too much for me. It was too much for me, and those guys were a lot better than I was ever going to be. I mean, there were guys like Vic Kalinsky, Bobby.
Oh, yes, I see him reaching out to me now, liking my stuff.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Oh yeah. Him, Randy Farrell. There were all these. That was the tenor line. The snare line was a great snare line. I mean, it was just that was like a dream. We used to stay at, there was a group of us from Massachusetts, and we stayed at, we call them affectionately Cupcakes. Everybody knows Cupcakes. John Kern. We stayed at his house in Bridgeport, him and his wife, Brenda, at the time. And Brenda passed away, unfortunately. But anyway, all the Massachusetts guys, they went back the following year. Cakes told me, you need to get some experience. Go back. You got years left. Go to Boston. So they, I ended up going to Boston, the next year.
What year is this? This is 83?
This is going, no, 82. 82 was my next year. And it was like, okay, 82, go to Boston. Now I'm still 18 years old. 18 going on 19.
So yeah, you still got 2 years at that point.
Yeah, I had 3 years actually. So I had 82 to 84. So 82, buddy of mine, Bob Gramboys, who we marched together in the Pom Poms together in Pittsfield. He played bass drum. 79, he was in avant-garde. He played 34-inch timpani.
Wow. Wow. Did he carry straps or leg brace or what?
Oh, he's a madman. That's a good thing. And the following year, he went in the Coast Guard. Now, this was funny. So he gets an assignment in Boston because he wants to march in the Crusaders. So he makes sure he gets stationed in Boston at North Shore for the Coast Guard so he can march. So he marches the 81 season. I run into, they came in to do an exhibition on the 4th of July weekend because there wasn't any show or anything like that. But, they got an exhibition and made money. So I got to meet him, and we talked about some stuff, about everything. So he wanted me to meet this guy from the soprano line, Michael Woodall, who's now, he's the man at Boston, really good guy. He was, Michael was in the soprano line, had unbelievable chops. So Bob was playing Waldo for the 2 years, for 81 and 82. So
how did they get the name Waldo?
There's a long story to Waldo. Well, it's not even a long story, but it's just it's like it came from Lowenbrow, that line. Somebody had,
And it's the image on the bass drum for audience, members who don't know what that is. It's an honor to be carrying that drum.
And that drum sits in a guy I marched with, sits in his high school band room right now. It's in pristine shape. And what they did is everybody who ever played that drum, when they got it in 1969, until its last day of service, everybody signed the inside of the drum.
Wow.
So you'll see all kinds of signatures in it if you opened it up. But there was always there was always a thing. We were standing next to Phantom one night at a retreat, and in this Phantom's bass drum player looks at Bob and says, "Mine's bigger." And Bob looks back at him and says, "Mine's louder." We used to. There were. I mean, that was the. I mean, my year in Herx was the start of the whirlwind of craziness things going on in drum corps. But you know, but my time in Boston was the epitome of building my character.
Talk about going into that winter camp rehearsals for Boston Crusaders. What year is this now?
Well, okay, it's a funny thing. All right, I went to the Corps in '82. 4th of July weekend, I joined the Corps in 1982. They had just gotten back from England. They did a month in England. Went there and did the tour. England, Holland, France, all that good stuff.
What size were they at that point?
118.
Oh, really? Okay, so they had grown. So for the audience, the Boston Crusaders from, I would say, 75 on, they were lucky. Like I said, I remember counting when they first came to the Memorial Day show, they had 25 horns. Maybe they ended up with 35, if that. But, you know, they sounded louder because they were tight. But, you know, they were always a smaller corps, but they were huge. They were the Boston Crusaders. So that's why I was asking what size they might have been at that point.
1973 was the Corps' first time of experiencing something like that. After the '72 season, the Corps lost a lot of members and
age outs,
just a whole lot of things, that being one of them. Just a whole bunch of things, and they ended up with I think it was like 18 horns.
Yeah.
You know, so the next time around was '79. After that '78 season, where
they started getting bigger again.
Yep, they were big in '78. Didn't make finals. To this day, a lot of people say should have made finals. I thought in '77 they should have made finals. They were just doing things.
You know what? It was close. It was close.
They wouldn't. DCI, well, just an opinion. DCI would not put in a corps that small, considering all these other corps were full. But they were bumping people off left and right, man. They were right in the thick of things. You know, where people were coming out with, you know, with 65 horns, you know, 50, 58, you know, they were bumping people off with like 34.
Yeah, exactly. They were loud. And that's when I really started to appreciate them, because we would see them at the New London Circus Show, which was the very first show of the DCI's season. It was always Memorial Day weekend. So we always get them. They would have 18, 25 horns, but they would be loud.
Yeah.
They were tough.
They knew how to push air. They knew how to push air through a horn. You know,
So you're joining them July 4th of 82, right?
Yeah. Now here's a funny thing. So you have a corps of 44 horns, full size guard, um, drum line, eight, 4, 5, cymbals, you know, um, little pit stuff going on. So my buddy says, here's what you need to do. He says, when you take the bus to Boston, get off in South Station, um, get on the train, take the red line, and take it to East Boston Stadium. So I get there. He goes, I'll meet you there. And so I get off the train at East Boston Stadium. I'm like, I could see the Corps over across the field. I'm like, I gotta walk all the way over there with all this stuff that I came with. So he comes over. So we're walking across the field, and all of a sudden somebody sees me in the Corps. They're running through the drum solo, and the horn line's doing this arc that rotates across the field. All of a sudden, everybody stopped.
So we got to explain this. The reason why everybody stopped, because you're the first African American to go join this Corps, right?
Correct.
So your thoughts were what at that point?
What am I getting myself into? I want to be here. I grew up watching the Crusaders and everything through time. They were the New England Corps, them and the 27th Lancers.
I'm still laughing at the whole Corps stopped.
They literally stopped. They literally
coming. They see this black guy coming to the Corps.
Yes. Well, they knew, they were told in advance that my buddy Bob told them, hey, my buddy's coming in. He's gonna fill a spot in the drum line. So he didn't tell everybody everything.
And good reason. And then so what happens? You get up to the Corps, and then what?
Well, we're trudging across the field. I'm like, okay, let's do this, man. I'm here. I'm not turning back now. I always wanted to be there's the world famous Boston Crusaders to me. I want to get in. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. So, this guy comes trudging across the field, and he stops me. He goes, hey, he goes, let me introduce myself. My name is Mark Belleville, and I am the director of the Corps. And he said, you being here, you're going to change this Corps for the better for the rest of his existence by doing what you're doing. He said, all I need you to do is don't say anything. Let anybody give you any grief, you come to me or you go to Bob. I will take care of everything. Don't worry about it. You're here. You're doing this Corps. You're doing this Corps a big service by being here, by bringing this Corps into the modern age. So I pull in, and we're walking, and it was just kind of surreal, he brings me by the snare line, and it's like, hey, this is Scotty, he wants to be in the drum line, so we're gonna get him in. So okay. He takes me over, introduces me to the head drum instructor, and it never clicked in me until I met him. It's like, he goes, hey, my name's Paul Pitts. And he goes, and I'm like, okay. He goes, yeah. He goes, I was a drum major here from 75 to 77. I'm like, you're my hero, man. I'm like,
Oh wow! I didn't never know who he was, but he was a tough guy. Just the presence that he had, being with Boston. Holy crap!
well, here's the story behind with Paul. Paul and his brother Danny were tenor players in the line. Paul marched in the tenor line from like 70 to like 72. Him and his brother Danny. Danny also taught the Matadors.
Yeah, they were good.
Yeah. Paul's phenomenal guy. He, there were so many. There ended up being so many brothers and sisters in that corps, man. That I wouldn't change one minute, one moment of it. You know, it it was like running a gauntlet for a while. You have to take some things, which I did.
Because a lot of people were a lot of them from South Boston, or for some people in the audience, Boston was kind of segregated. Depending who you were.
Boston was very segregated. And not everybody was from South Boston. Not everybody was from South Boston. My one of my best friends, a lot of my best friends were from South Boston, though. To this day, brothers will always be. So there was one kid, Paul Carroll. There's another couple of brothers, John and Bobby Lee, Terry Connolly, his brother Neil Connolly. There were all these guys that looked out for me. Bob Bedard. I mean, there were just people, and they were all in the Corps during the time of the Corps being very segregated. But that was just their upbringing and what they did. So I can't explain it. I don't begrudge them anything on it. It's what it was. I mean, the bus boycotts, all that stuff that were going on.
It's one of the reasons why I didn't want to move to Boston, not because of fear or anything. I was just not interested in going up north. I wanted to go cross country. I wanted to go to California, where I am.
Yeah. I mean, before Bob and I went to Boston, there were other guys that were from Pittsfield that were in the Crusaders. And it took us, time to find out about that. Terry Connolly told us stories about these guys that they marched with back in the early 70s, back in like 70, 71, Billy Mattia and Walter Ellerby. These guys were in the horn line, and Billy was a drummer, I believe, but they were, They were from Pittsfield, and they actually marched with my brother, my oldest brother, in the Cavaliers.
Interesting.
How's that for a roundabout with you?
So you're getting into, all right, so it's after July 4th. This is 82, right?
Yeah.
So the drum corps season is already in the mix. They're coming of Europe. So what happens after like July 9th, 10th? Where are you guys? Where are they going next? So it's like CYO's coming up, right?
We're supposed to be heading out Midwest to
Maybe in Ohio, maybe?
We're supposed to be going straight to Whitewater.
Okay, so DCI East. I mean DCI Midwest.
Yeah. But that didn't happen.
Why was that?
The bus never came. So sorry about that.
Wait a minute. The bus never came?
No, the bus didn't come. There's a reason the bus didn't come.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. There were some things missing, namely money.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. So you make it to DCI Midwest. Then what?
We didn't get to Midwest. So the bus finally came. The buses finally came. Go figure, Boston had a bunch of buses for the first time in a long time. You know, so we're heading out to Ohio. We're going to do a show. We're doing
school buses or coaches?
I think it was South Shore Bus, because South Shore Bus was the Corps' bus line. Because we had a song for South Shore Bus.
All right, so for the audience that doesn't know, when you're getting ready to go on tour, if you wanted to travel and you had the money, you traveled by coach. For us, when we went, we had school buses that we converted into living quarters, where we took the seats out and we could make beds out of them, and when we put shelves above on there so you can put your stuff on. And then when you wanted to sleep, you didn't want to sleep sitting, you would get underneath the sleep or in the aisles and sleeps. That's what we did. That was called being on tour. So for what you guys did, you had the South Shores, right?
We had South Shore buses, and they were Trailway Silver Eagles.
Okay.
And it was the same thing. We had to.
Did you have all drummers on one bus?
Well, it was. You had the drum bus, you had the horn bus, and you had the girls bus. They still kept things separated that way.
Yeah, we had that too. We had the girls bus, we had the boys bus, and we had a mixed bus.
Yeah, no, there were no mixed buses. No mixed buses. A girls bus, a horn bus, and a drum bus. Because it got pretty between the horn line and the drum line, the rivalry could get pretty good on, when you're on the road.
And initiations too. Did you guys have initiations also?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Explain to them what initiation is in a drum corps.
Today it would be called hazing.
Back then it was called getting back at the people that screwed off during winter rehearsals. And they would always say this in Surfers and Sword Excalibur, wait till we go on tour. When they would say that, wait till we go on tour, that was like, we're gonna get you back. When you were driving on tour and we may kidnap you in the front of the bus or the mixed bus and drag you to the back, and all kinds of things happen.
In Boston, we had a thing called phone call. If you got a phone call, you better answer the phone call. And the phone call would be to the back of the bus. And the phone call was an equal opportunity phone call. So you would hear somebody from the back of the bus scream, so and so, you have a phone call in the back of the bus. You have a phone call in the back of the bus, you know, and that was your cue. You need to go back there. And the idea of going back to answer that phone call was you went back with arms, legs, anything you could have, just flailing in the air to fight off what was coming at you.
Yeah, you didn't know what was coming. For us, the initiation was sometimes you got kidnapped and dragged to the back of the bus. They didn't care if you were sleeping or not. Everybody was going to go to the initiation programs. And then people would come in during winter rehearsals and say, oh, you guys aren't going to get me. Well, when you got 15 people coming to get you, there's no fighting back. You just aren't gonna. You can't do anything. You might as well just give in at that point.
Oh, yeah. It was some crazy stuff that went on, man. Now, I'll tell you about Paul Pitts. Now, this is how crazy these guys were. They were crazy enough to give him a phone call to the back of the bus. And he said he turned around and he looked at him. He said, "You guys don't want to do this." And they were like, "Get back here. There's a phone call for you." He said, "Hold my beer," basically. And he went back there. He lit everybody up. You could tell he was from the old corps by the way he lit everybody up. You would have thought he was going after somebody from SAC or somebody from 27 or something. He lit everybody in the back of that bus. He lit them up. People got off the bus with black eyes.
Hey, so all right, so we're in the summer of '82. So talk about rivalries before we go into the rest of the summer on that, because people were so
yeah.
would get together and kind of have little battles, right?
The rivalries were pretty simplistic. 27th, North Star, the Defenders from Rockland, any corps from Massachusetts. And then, we weren't too boomy on Phantom.
Why was that?
They were arrogant.
Okay.
They were arrogant, but that nothing came with that until '83. And that, they thought they were going to dog us out because '83 was a totally different story. They found out differently.
Did you guys ever have any rivalry when it came to muchachos at all?
They weren't around at that point.
Okay, that's right, yeah.
Troopers were the rivalry.
Really? Troopers?
Troopers talk smack. They talk smack. We were at Akron, right? Is that where the Football Hall of Fame is?
Akron? Yes, it is. Yep. Oh well, that's in Canton.
Canton. We were at Canton, and they were coming out of the stadium, and we were going in. And they're like, "You guys are gonna fold. You guys are done. Wait till you get off the field. You ain't gonna have a corps no more." We didn't know what they were talking about. They were like, "You guys are done. Enjoy your last time on the field because you guys are done." We went, and it just ticked us off to no end. We were like, "We're gonna get okay. Here we go once again, us and the troopers." There's a story about the old corps staying in a gym with the troopers, and somebody in the middle of the night, you know, because they felt such a love fest for the troopers, decided they were going to throw one of their white bucks across the floor of the trooper. And it landed in the middle of the gym. And somebody from the troopers, who threw the chew? And they were like, what? Somebody who threw the chew? And that was always a thing. We had all kinds of little things we would, you know, little things we would say or whatever that, you know, had historical value to it. That
That's
was
funny.
one of them. But they had heard through the grapevine before we did. I guess Jim Jones was parked next to the director at the time. For us, you know, that he was taking off. He was just going to leave the Corps high and dry. Bye, see ya. And he did. He left the Corps.
You guys in Ohio?
Yep.
Wow.
So the Corps finished the show, had a good night, and had a meeting after that. So Tony DiCarlo, Paul Pitts, and Tony DiCarlo was the assistant director. All right. Now Tony just got inducted into, well, he just, you know, got his notice that he's been inducted into the World Hall of Fame for DCI the other day. I'd do anything for that dude, man, after what he did. He said, here's what we can do. We can turn tail, we can fold right here, and everybody can get home. You know, you can get home with other corps, whatever. He said, or Paul Pitts and I'll take our credit cards and we'll max out our credit cards and we'll get us through the rest of this tour. And then we'll reorganize. Some people left, but not that many people left. Everybody said, we want to finish this tour. We're here to play. We're not here to run. So we finished out the tour.
How many people do you think left?
Maybe a handful.
Okay.
We had 82, the Corps was big, and there was a reason for it.
Because you were going to Europe.
Right. So we got an influx of people from the Blue Knights. How that happened.
That's interesting. That's weird.
Yeah. We got an influx of people from Denver. And we got an influx of people from Virginia Beach also, which made up a good portion of the Corps. You know, and then you had the locals, you know, which, you know, the talks had pretty much instilled in them, you be a Crusader until the end of the season. And they did. So the Corps pulled all its money together in order to feed itself for the rest of the summer, which is like a week and a half, I think it was, a week and a half.
Yeah, because you're beginning almost mid-July at that point.
Yep.
Interesting. And for the audience is you would start, then you started, I think did the tour start like June 16th like it does now, or was it still the end of May?
It was still the end of May.
Okay, so then you were ending right about August, second week of August still, or the third week still?
We were at the end End of July. We're just at the beginning of August.
Okay, so like
End of July,
it
August.
would be now. So you would end of the second week of August. But usually
Yeah.
it used to go, and for those East Coast tours, you would always end Memorial Day, I mean Labor Day weekend. You would end up like the final Northeastern Circus show if that was still going on, but I don't think it was at that.
Yeah, that wasn't going on then. No, I think for 82, I think it was mid-August. It was like August 17th or something, like somewhere
Okay,
between
yeah.
the 14th or 17th.
Which would have been the afterwards, because the reason for that is a lot of people from the South, they started school sometimes some at the end of July, but usually the first week of August because of planting season. And then a lot of some schools would start the second week of August, and then you would start to see little holes start to disappear in general. So that's why the season started to get shorter. Now
Right.
it's the second week of August, so everybody can get back to where they're going to for band camp and for some of some people going to college. That's what
Yeah.
happens with everything.
It was like first tour, I mean, that's how it was easy for me. It was, first, there was no first tour. They're in Europe for first tour. So it wasn't like, but,
And then you join them after July 4th. And then when the buses come, as you would say, you guys head to Canton, Ohio. So then some people left, a handful of people left the Corps. And then you're going, where's finals that year?
Montreal.
Oh, that's right. All right, so it's in Canada for the second year. Oh, is that the first? No, yes, for the second year, it's in Canada.
Well, here's the thing. We hadn't hit the stride yet. That's come to think of it, because they still had DCI Canada, which we hadn't been to yet. You still had DCI North in Ypsilanti.
And then you said still had DCI East in Allentown.
We didn't do Allentown.
Okay.
In 82, we didn't do Allentown. So there was everything else. There, there was like Butler, which was what?
The American International Show, which was always a good show.
Yep. We call it the EIEIO.
I just remember being there, and I just remember that small little package store where we stayed. That store made a killing. It was the only one there. We, the average kid went back 2, 3, 4 times for candy.
Yep.
They said we were so good, just us Corps, they sold out. They made a killing.
Oh my God. There were some, you have places that pop up in your head that,
I remember that. Hey, how was it? So you were on the drummer's bus, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you didn't really have any problems. Problems that, you being the person of color after a while. After a while, did they kind of take to you, would you say?
Yeah, drummers are drummers, man. And it was, the drum line was a little interesting, because there was a mix of the Virginia Beach folks. There were some guys from New Hampshire, the Southie guys, guys from Quincy.
What were you playing then? Were you playing tenor or were you playing snare?
I played number 5 bass.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, because when I showed up, it was like,
Because the spots were taken already.
Right, and they wanted to put me on cymbals, and I was like, I'll go home. I was like, I'll go home, and it was the thing.
Because you had just come from the Hurricanes and winning, right?
Yeah, I'm like, I'm not doing that.
And you play tenor, right?
Yep, but and it was like, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing it.
Yeah, that's not like you didn't sign up to go from winning from the Connecticut Hurricanes DCA. Well, you were there in the Corps, but going to play cymbals in Boston Crusaders. That didn't make any sense at that point.
Right. So they went. They had a little huddle up, and they said, "Okay." Bob said, there's parts. He said, "There's parts I don't need to play that he can play." And the fourth bass drum said, "There's parts I don't need to play, he can play." So that's how my parts got written.
Okay.
But also, there was a little insult to injury added there. They're like, Bob was like, "Okay, but you get the gong."
Well, was it an honor to have, accessories at that point too?
Yeah, but number 5 drum was heavier than Waldo.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But he knew that.
Well, but you were wearing braces right at that point, right?
Yeah, we had the T-bars.
Okay.
But
So for the people in the audience, in the old days, we had straps, and those leave marks on you in the summer when you take your shirt off, and it would just get to you because there was no breathing room. It was straps. So imagine straps on for 10, 12 hours during rehearsals, and then you do a show at night. You might as well have slept with them. It just make marks on your body. So when they started putting contraptions on to make basses, tenors, even snares like they have today, where you can run around with these instruments, you couldn't do running with that, but you had to go running to get back to your place. Remember that? Run back to the spots.
Oh, and push-ups too.
Yep. And then you had to take the straps off if you made a mistake and do push-ups.
Yep. You did 10 push-ups right there.
And if you were really screwed up, someone would probably come and kick you in the ass. If they didn't do worse, getting you back on making that phone call on the bus.
There were things you didn't want to do. You didn't want to flinch. You didn't want to do anything. You didn't want to mess up. Nope.
And for Boston, you never crossed through their lines. You never went in the middle of the corps because that whole corps might tack you. If you were a spectator, it's just like, no, you have to go around. You weren't cutting through ranks.
We had a couple of those.
What happened?
They did the Holyoke Parade that year before I got there. I was at the Holyoke Parade. The drunks were, play something, and they were, they just got finished playing something. So somebody,
That's right. I forgot about that. You would have people who were drunk because, they're drinking during the plays and they would come up and wander. Hey, play us something. I forgot all about that. Standing at attention, waiting to move sometimes.
And we had this kid, Tommy Devine, Massachusetts Golden Gloves boxing. He was like a welterweight or middleweight, but he was a baritone. Oof. He was rough. He was from Southie. He was Southie.
How'd you guys get along?
By the end, Tommy was all right. But he didn't tell me that until finals night, as he was walking through the middle of the Blue Devils guard as they were doing drop spins, and he was he was introducing himself to every one of them.
Why?
Because we had nothing else. We had no food, but we had beer.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
It was, well, the drink, the age was still 18 at that time.
Right.
And we were in Montreal, and it was like, the alcohol content is much higher up here for beer than it is down.
When in doubt, when it came to food or beer, you bought beer, right?
Yep. Bought beer and thought about the other part later.
Yeah.
You know? So
About 5 minutes on this because we're gonna do a part two. Um, you're on tour, getting to Montreal. What was that like?
a couple of days before we got to Montreal, after DCI Canada, we made finals there.
Was that the first time you made finals?
No, I think we made. It may have been, but I think we did in Ypsilanti.
Okay.
But in Canada, DCI Canada, I think it was Hamilton. They came out on the field and they were like, nobody's playing anybody off tonight. The Madison Scouts will play everybody off. And we're like, this is the last show we're not going to make finals in Montreal. Not that we're not going to try, but, and they're going to cut us short for this. We were like, man, we're playing. Forget this. We're playing. So Madison starts, they're playing their street beat, which was Holopolis from Spiral Gyra, which is a real cool tune.
The only one I remember Madison playing was their 75 street beat. That's the only one I remember.
Yeah. Holopolis was nice. But there's a lot that went on this night. I'll tell you all about it real quick. So, after we got off the field, Avant-Garde was at the show too. And this was the first year Avant-Garde had just purchased Seneca Optimus uniforms.
Okay.
So they had the yellow uniforms.
Right.
And some of the guys that I had marched with were still in the Corps. So they came up to me and they were like, Seneca said, alumni from Seneca said they're gonna get us after the show. Can you guys help us? I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, they're gonna jump us after the show. Can you guys stick up for us? So I'm like, let me find out. So I went over and I said, hey, Tommy, the baritone, the Golden Gloves guy. I said, come with me for a minute. I said, these guys are saying Seneca's going to jump them after the show and they want some help. Tommy looked at them and he goes, yeah, we'll help you. But after we beat them, we're going to beat you. He said, learn to fight your own battles. So this is why we were like, we're gonna play. We're not putting up with this going out of the stadium. So the crowd's sitting there, and the scores are announced. I think we were in like eighth place, something like that. And everybody, the crowd's just sitting there going, waiting for Madison. I think they won that night. They were gonna play whatever, or whoever won, but I think it was Madison. So they're playing their street beat and everything. So up through the ranks comes the drum major for us, and he's this guy Chris Rachley, and he goes, when I say it, hit 4 for nothing and play Vinny's, roll off and play Conquest. Vinny's is the street beat, which is,
Is that the one from the 70s?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I can't remember what it is, but I loved it.
Yeah, we all played it. You had to learn. It was just, it was something you had to know by heart. There were three different street beats that you had to have. You had to have Vinny's, you had to have metal shoes and tulips, and you had to have Camelot. All
So is the one 77, 78, is that Camelot?
77, 78 was Persian Market. We had to have that one too. Excuse me.
That was great. I love that one.
We had to have 4. So we had that one as well.
Here's what I'm going to do, because only got 2 minutes left. Give social media links so people can reach out to you.
Okay. Absolutely. So I will do that. But we ended up playing Conquest in the middle of Madison Street Beat, and the crowd went nuts. So
Hey, that's Boston for you, right? They do their own thing. They always have.
yep. The crowd loved it.
Anything from Madison afterwards?
Nah, they didn't even come near us, because we immediately got off the field, got out of our jackets, and we were going to go find Seneca.
That's funny. All right, give your social media link so people can reach out to you.
You got it. All right, so we'll pick this up again.
How do people reach you on Facebook?
On Facebook, I'm just there. Just find me, Scott Williamson. I'm on Facebook, or come check out. I'm a moderator on a page called the Museum History of Drum Corps, which posts a lot of history of drum corps, and videos, audio, pictures, everything, man. It's real cool.
And I want to thank Scott for coming on and bringing us halfway to the point. This is part 1 of When We March, of all the corps that he marched with. So next week, we're going to pick up with part 2 of going from DCI Canada right up to the current date. So I'm Brian Sebastian, Movie Reviews and More, the Women's Broadcast TV Network, ITube 247 out of Franklin, Tennessee. We will see you next week.